Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Shocking Tales Digest #1, published in 1981 by Harvey Comics. This is kind of interesting because Harvey Comics for decades had just published kiddie comics, Richie Rich, hot stuff. And I guess in 1981, around Halloween time, they were already selling digest-sized comics of their, Richie Rich and stuff. So they figured, we have all these old reprints from the Golden Age, because Harvey was around since the Golden Age. And let's just reprint them. And some of them are even pre-code. And they were like, maybe it'll sell to the kids on Halloween. It didn't apparently sell very well because it was never a #2. But for comic book fans, this was an amazing treasure trove. Remember, this is before anything was reprinted. There wasn't many great reprints like there is now. So there's some amazing stuff in here, some classic stories, also some very ridiculous stories. Harvey was kind of like American Comics Group, where their stories are very silly and kind of bonkers. They're really weird, but kind of makes them more fun because, believe me, you can't predict the endings of some of these stories because they're so dumb that you're just like, I didn't see that coming. That's for sure. So we start off with a cover with most of this art is from Stories Within. But this center thing apparently was drawn by Ernie Colon, who drew I think thousands of pages for Harvey. He was their main guy for 20 years. He just drew so much Richie Rich and stuff. Not very great cover, but I like this logo. We have a little kind of contents type page. And almost all of these reprints are from the 50s. A few are pre-code, like this first story, Strange Superstitions, but some are after the code came in from 1957. So this one is drawn, penciled and inked by Howard Nostrand, though Grand Comic Database seems to think that Al Avison might have helped with the inks. And this is just one of those one-page fillers that comics had back then, just a kind of true facts, Ripley's Believe It or Not stuff, just talking about superstitions of the Middle Ages. I guess a magpie was a portent of doom, and cuckoo birds were a sign of good fortune, shit like that. It's kind of silly. So this first story, real story here, Colorama. This is a classic. This was has been reprinted a bunch of times because it's kind of considered one of the great comics of the Golden Age. It's pretty amazing. It's written and penciled by Bob Powell and inks by Howard Nostrand. So the art's amazing in this. The writing's actually really good in these captions. Bob Powell was a good writer, especially compared to the guys writing back then. But I don't think he wrote much. But this is a great story. So I love this little logo here with the colors in it, even on this shitty paper. And, I'm sure Harvey didn't have the best printing. It looks pretty great. So this guy is driving home one night, and he sees this, a deep blaring red, almost like an asterisk. It starts to melt and then drip. And then it splits into tiny particles. Just a really bizarre imagery there. The guy looks up again. Turns out it's just the stoplight. Next, he sees this blue blob coming towards his car, insinuating itself right up to the window. Such a weird image. And then it turns out it's just a police officer. He gives them a ticket for running that red light. So this guy goes to an optometrist, and he diagnoses him with a hypersensitivity to color. He says, "You're in luck. I've actually been trying to perfect a pair of glasses to correct this disease for years. This is what I've done so far. It's a prototype. It's not quite ready." The guy puts on the glasses, tries them on, and colors go back to normal. No weird shapes. The guy takes them off and says, "We'll continue our examination tomorrow. I got to close up. But sorry, I can't give you these glasses, They're not for sale. There's still a flaw in them." The guy's walking home late at night, And the street lamp does another crazy psychedelic thing. So the next day when he goes, he tries to cajole the guy into selling him the glasses again. And he says, I told you, no, there's a flaw. I can't do it. I'm sorry. It's kind of weird here. This blue face. I think it's supposed to be the shadow of something, but it just looks weird. So that night, late at night, the guy goes back, breaks into the place and steals the glasses. He puts them on, and at first he's all happy. All the colors look natural. He rounds a corner and he sees these children playing. I'm sorry, this is the next morning, I guess, because it's daylight. And they're playing in an alley, and all of a sudden the colors begin to fade into weak pastels, then a purplish miasma. Then the purple goes away, and it's just this stark black and white. That looks so amazing to me. And then it's just black. He realizes that the glasses could not hold back that one color, black. And so that's basically he's blinded forever. This is an amazing story. I forgot to mention, I just love the way he draws this guy. Well, both of them. I think a lot of it's Howard Nostrand's inks. Next, we have Logan's Next Life. And this is possibly a Jack Kirby script, but it's definitely Jack Kirby pencils and Joe Simon inks. This is from 1957. This is a weird little story. So we see this guy, Tom. This stray dog comes up to the house. He has this weird triangle birthmark. And Tom thinks back to his old roommate, Rex. Rex Logan. And Rex was a kind of a heartless dick. He was a ladies' man, and he'd just like break women's hearts and not even feel bad about it. Tom happens to be reading a book on reincarnation at the time, and he tells Rex, he says, the theory is that if you live like a snake in this life, you might be a beetle or some other low form of life in the next. But you can regain your human form by doing one unselfish act. Of course, Rex is all like, that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I have a blessed life because of the triangle birthmark on my shoulder. I guess it's just like his lucky charm. So back to the present, the dog runs away. And as the dog runs away, he calls him. He says, Rex, wait. And the wife says, why'd you call that stray dog by name as if you knew him? And he's like, I don't know. I kind of blurted it out. So a few nights later, they go to see a movie. When they come home, their house is on fire. The firefighter's already there, and their baby is in there. They have a child. And the fireman's like, don't go in there. You won't have a chance. And then all of a sudden, that dog comes running out with the baby. And the dog saved the baby, but he dies from smoke inhalation. And I guess a little while later, Tom and his wife have another child. And this infant, the doctor says, he's got a strange birthmark on his shoulder, and it's a triangle. And of course, Tom is like, could that have happened? Is this Rex? Very strange. Very lackluster Kirby Simon art, I gotta say. Very dull. This next one has anything but dull art. This is the lineup. And this is maybe written by Howard Strand, but definitely drawn by him. This is some really nice, interesting art here. So we're in this small town, like in the Ozarks, and I guess they don't even have police out there. They're waiting for the state troopers to show up. But in the meantime, these villagers, they don't want this murderer running free, so they line up all the possible suspects. So I guess that morning, the local storekeeper was murdered. And the townspeople figured these are the people that could have done it. Basically, the main character here, he's like, he knows something. In fact, he's probably the guilty party. So they eliminate all of the suspects one by one. And I just love these interesting faces that Nostrand draws. And I love the way he draws this old codger. So then I guess there's this, she's like the peach of the valley. She's this beautiful woman. They suspect her, they start questioning her. And she says, "Why would I hurt Hank?" That's the name of the store owner. "I loved him. I expected to marry him." She says, "Yeah, I stopped over at his place, but when I left, he was alive." And that main guy, he's thinking to himself, will she talk? And now we see in his memory, we see what really happened. He heard gunshots from the store, from Hank's place, and he looked through the window. Basically, Hank was shooting a gun to scare his girlfriend. He missed her on purpose, but he said, "If I ever hear about you dating someone else, I may not miss the next time." And this woman sees Jed, that's his name, Jed, looking in the window. And then finally, this woman blurts out, she says, "I'll tell you who killed Hank. It was Jed. I saw him kill Hank. Jed hated Hank for always hitting him. Jed hates everyone." And so they descend upon Jed. "Sure, Jed, you did it for her. You shot Hank because he was making her unhappy. You couldn't stand to see her unhappy. She was the only person in the world you loved." So a lot of these Harvey stories, they just don't quite fit. The writers just didn't really know how to construct a story well. There's much worse to come, believe me. This next one is called The Hero, and this is written by Jack Olek, who wrote many an EC script, and pencils and inks by Marvin Stein. I think Marvin Stein did work for Tower Comics, like the Thunder Agents and that stuff. This one is, this is a perfect example of these really dumb twist endings. So we see these two guys on Earth, and they're observing the first astronaut to ever make it to Mars. And we see this little guy, and there's Martians attacking him. He's trying to get back to his spaceship, to get back to Earth. These guys are firing at him. But the whole time, one of the guys on Earth just can't hide his jealousy. He's just like, "Oh, I always wanted to be, a spaceman, go to outer space. But I guess I just don't, I'm just not the type." And he just keeps talking about how it's just like, "I wish I could be him." Even though this guy's getting shot at by Martians, you'd think he'd be glad he wasn't on Mars. And finally, this guy makes it back to Earth. And these two guys who are watching him greet him. And we find out why this guy wasn't the right type. Because I guess in the future, they have they can only build these tiny spaceships. So only little people can pilot them. So only little people can be astronauts. Such a dumb twist ending. So silly. This next one's called First Man on the Moon. And this is an unknown writer, but it's penciled and inked by Bob Powell. And this is the year 1958, which is weird because this was written and drawn in 1958, or at least published. And it's like science fiction. But I don't know why they didn't put it ahead a few years, So this guy, basically, is the first astronaut to go to the moon. He's going to check for any life. So as soon as he gets to the moon, he basically travels around the whole surface for weeks and months, every inch of the moon, to see if there's any life. And he realizes and reports back to Earth. He says, "Nope, there's no life here." Then he's in his spaceship, and he's reporting, once again back to Earth. And he hears footsteps outside. And then he hears knock, knock on the door. And that's the end. That is so dumb. So I guess the twist is that there's no life on Mars. But is there? so just badly constructed. This next one's called Canceled. Once again, nobody knows who wrote it, but the pencils and inks are by Joe Certa. It's kind of a very convoluted, odd story. There's this guy, Mr. Gregory. He's kind of rich, and he has a business partner that he wants to dispose of. So he hires this guy, Willie, to kill him. He pays him $500. And ironically, actually, I don't know if I'm using the word, if that's correct, but strangely enough, The next day, the partner gets in an auto accident. He's not dead, but he's pretty incapacitated, so he's out of the picture, which is what Mr. Gregory wanted. So, so then he basically says, hey, he calls Willie in and says, I want that money back. You don't have to kill him now. Which I would have just been like, fuck you. It's like, that's not my fault. So Willie has already spent the money on gambling, or lost it on gambling. And Mr. Gregory basically threatens him to tell the cops about what he was planning to do, which is weird because Mr. Gregory actually committed hiring him to kill someone. That's a total crime. I guess this guy, it's a total crime to plan to kill someone. So, but Mr. Gregory figures, nobody's going to believe you. You're this cheap thug. I'm a very well-respected man. So even though you have something on me, the cops are going to believe me. So you better get me that money. So Willie runs around to all of his friends trying to bum money. No luck. I love this crazy panel here with the colors on his face. That's so weird. Really well-drawn face, though. And then he says, maybe I'll talk to the district attorney. Maybe he can help. But a cop says, move along. So then he goes back to Mr. Gregory's place, and he says, just give me one more chance. I just need a little more time. And Mr. Gregory says, this is going to work. I got to take this guy out. So he follows Willie, and it looks like he's heading to the station house. I think Willie's just going to squeal. And so Mr. Gregory waits until, it's a dark alley, no one's around, and he attacks Willie with his judo skills. But Willie's way stronger than him, and he starts beating him up, and then Mr. Gregory takes off. He runs away. And so, and this doesn't make any sense. For some reason, this gives Gregory a total change of heart. And he races to his partner's house to confess and beg for mercy. I don't know why. No one's home. And so he just waits on the stoop. And then the cops show up and say, you better come along with me quietly. And that's the end. It's just such a weird, odd story that just kind of goes nowhere. Oh, but this makes up for it just for how silly this is in a fun way. This is called the cadmus seed, and it's Jack Kirby doing everything and even writing it. And this is from 57. And we see this guy. He's basically a business guy, and he's this scientist named Professor Horace Guger invited him to look at his new experiment. He takes out these seeds, and he says, look at them in the microscope. I've developed these seeds. This is my invention. And he looks at the microscope, and there are these tiny little babies. And Guger says, okay, come downstairs to the basement. I'll show you the real, something even more amazing. And he's got full-grown cadmus beings. They're like plant men, like Morlock 2001. And apparently they're very aggressive naturally, and they're very strong. So Guger has this plan that he's going to build his own army. And I think he wants to turn them into like a mercenary force, and he'll rent them out to any country. And he says, I need you, your business acumen, so I can make a lot of money from these guys. Bullets can't hurt them. And the business guy says, I insist you put a stop to this. And he says, nonsense. So then the business guy's thinking about doing something, like he's got to stop this guy. And then just by chance, the guy's laboratory blows up. So he doesn't have to. He's killed in the explosion. Almost everything he was working on explodes, except 20 of those plant men are found, and they're alive. Of course, the doctors are totally befuddled, but the businessman fills them in on what's up with them. I guess he gains custody of them, and he makes money off of them by, basically turning them into sports figures. They totally dominate in football and boxing, and I guess he's like their agent / manager. And I guess there's a few other things that survived the explosion. One of them is this bag, this little sack, and there's seeds in there. So he takes them to a scientist, and the scientist says, I guess Dr. Googer went a little bit farther in his work. Take a look. And, oh, this panel kills me. I was reading this last night, and I just couldn't stop laughing. I like kept looking at this panel, flipping back and just laughing. It's so silly. Dr. Googer, his little smock. There's like 50,000 of them. And so I guess this guy just dumps the seeds, and he says, I'm not going to grow any of them. I think one Horace Googer was enough. Zany. Oh, guys, this is so worth the price of admission. This is worth the price of 10 admissions. This story just blows me away. It's called The Fourth Dimension is a Many Splattered Thing. Just that title is worth the price alone. And this is so great. This is all Jack Kirby, and it's basically him goofing on modern art. But look what a genius Jack Kirby is like, he's just, obviously this isn't his thing, modern art, this kind of art, abstract expressionism, but he does it so well. I could picture this on a museum wall. I'm sure if Jack Kirby had some connections and painted a canvas of this, it would have sold for thousands of dollars. It's just great stuff. So basically we see these guys, they're roommates, Eddie and Max, and they own a store together. And every night, someone's breaking into their apartment, but they're only taking like goofy little things, like taking a comb or taking a newspaper. But they leave it all disheveled. And so Eddie says, we're going to stay up tonight. We're going to catch these guys. So they stay up half the night. And then all of a sudden, this portal opens in the middle of their living room, and the shadowy figure comes out of it. And the way he draws this, the contrast to the shadowy figure in the dark room is so creepy to me. This panel is just so great. And I guess the creature like steals some goofy stuff, like a cigarette lighter, a fountain pen, but he takes Eddie's new hat, and that sets Eddie off. He's just like, I love that hat. You're not getting that. So he chases the shadowy figure. The shadowy figure dives back into the portal, and he dives in after him. And he ends up in this crazy dimension. It's like the Picasso dimension. And every time he moves, he changes shape. So these panels are so amazing to me. Jack Kirby just totally going abstract. So he's wandering around trying to figure out, trying to find that shadowy figure. But then he just wants to find that screen, that teleporting screen, to get back to Earth, because it's not fun constantly warping. Look at all these panels, though. So good. I wish I had a bigger version of this. And then all of a sudden, these like geometric shapes and weird things start pursuing him and trying to capture him, kind of. Just more great stuff here. Eventually, there's this giant wheel just comes rolling after him. He's running to escape, and right when the wheel comes upon his heels, it turns into these rings, and they envelop him and bind him. But he's right near the portal, so with his last bit of strength, he jumps through the portal, and he comes back to his apartment, and the rings turn into this beautiful woman. And then the screen disappears. I guess it breaks. It kind of just sputters out. And the woman tells Eddie that she's from Mars, and she was traveling to Earth through the fourth dimension. That's what we saw. And she also says that she's in love with him. He says, we don't even know each other. She says, one of the first things I took from you guys is a picture of you, and I fell in love with it by looking at it. And I guess all those nutty shapes that were chasing him were her. And she says, do I look better in the third dimension? And he says, you look sensational. This is so weird. Jack Kirby at one time could draw attractive women. She looks great. Which apparently Jack Kirby lost that skill sometime in the early 60s. Because Jack Kirby's women are just kind of goony. He just couldn't draw an attractive woman to save his life. Even though I do kind of a thing for Big Barda. But she says, oh, I can't go back to Mars, not until they build another telescreen. What will I do? And he says, first, marry me. Second, return my new hat. And they kiss, and they're going to get married. It's so, like, they don't even know each other. Such an odd story, but so zanily brilliant. This is like, oh, I love it. Now we have another all Kirby masterpiece. Well, kind of like a goofy masterpiece, The Last Enemy. And this is interesting because it's almost a trial run for Commandy. It's, we see this time traveler. He goes to the far future, 2514 AD. He stashes his time machine in this cave. He comes upon this battlefield. He sees all these dead tiger people, and they're all wearing clothing. And then he sees this rat creature wearing a uniform. And the rat creature informs him that there was an atomic war, all the humans were killed, and so the animals took over the earth. And he says that, we've been, you humans have left us language, culture, weapons. So they all speak English. And basically this rat creature isn't so nice. His soldiers sneak up behind the guy and conk him on the head. He wakes up in the underground rat tunnels where the rats live, and this guy's interrogating him. He wants to get the secrets of the atom bomb, because they've been at war with the other animal races on the surface for, I guess, forever. And they figure if we have the atom bomb, we can finally win this war and take over the world. I guess the guy won't give him the secrets, so he basically changes his line of interrogation and says, well, where's your time travel machine? We'll use it, go back to your time, and get the secrets ourselves. And he won't tell him. And then luckily, all of a sudden, there's a raid warning. The rats' tunnels are being raided. We see this giant drilling kind of troop transport break through their ceiling, and all these soldiers come out with gas masks. They pump gas into the tunnels and knock out everyone and defeat the rats. So the guy is knocked out again, and he wakes up this time in a comfortable bed surrounded by a dog doctor, a gorilla soldier, and a fox soldier. So it's very Commandy. I think there was a guy in Commandy that looked like this dog. And they basically tell him that, all the other animals have made an alliance a long time ago. And basically they're all fighting the rats. And by talking to their bulldog general, he's basically the big military commander. By talking to him, the time traveler realizes that they're the good guys. And so this is such a strange thing. So he gives them the secrets of the atom bomb. He's like, basically, you can use this against the rats and get rid of them finally. He goes back to his time machine, heads back to his normal time. And as he's leaving, he thinks, I wonder if another man would have given them the atom bomb. I think so. It's better that the world go to the dogs than a lot of scheming rats. And it's so weird, like this goofy little joke at the end. It's like, dude, they're all going to destroy themselves just like humanity did. Why are the animals going to do any better with atom bombs, But this is a fun story. Really like it. Okay, another all Kirby thing. Donegan's Daffy Chair. And this just sums up these Harvey stories, just how silly they were. Even Jack Kirby was being sillier drawing for them. So we see this janitor. He works at the patent office. This guy's waiting there, and I guess he has to run and do an errand. And his invention, which kind of looks like an office chair, he says, will you keep an eye on this? Just don't sit in it, though. Don't mess with it. Of course, the janitor doesn't care, doesn't listen, and he sits in the chair. And it's this weird chair. It's got like this almost like keyboard in front, and it's got these goggles. So the janitor gets in it, and it takes off, flying through the city. And it flies out into outer space, and leaves the solar system. And so for all intents and purposes, everyone just thought he was dead. He had a few friends. But then years later, he comes back in the chair wearing this amazing Mobius-like hat. This is so cool looking. And this cop is all like, hey, what's going on here? And the janitor talks in this weird alien language. And so I guess that's the ending of, I guess he went away for years and lived on this alien planet and then came home. But just once again, very clunky storytelling. Like, okay, so that's it. This next one's called The Hole in the Wall. And this is written and penciled by Jack Kirby, inks by Marvin Stein. I kind of like this art, the Marvin Stein inks on Kirby. So we see this guy, he works for a newspaper. He's basically the proofreader, but recently he's been writing these articles for the travel section. And it's like this made-up place. He writes these travel articles about going to this weird fantasy land or something. And he's the laughingstock of the newspaper. And the editor-in-chief is fed up with him. And he basically says, you're fired. This is ridiculous. So he has to move out of his apartment and find a cheap boarding house. So he finds this really crappy boarding house. He lives in the basement. And, there's it's winter, but there's cracked windows. It's freezing. And one morning he wakes up and all of a sudden it's warm in his apartment. He doesn't get it because everyone else in the housing, the house is just like, it's freezing in our places. I wish you'd fix the heater. So he searches around his apartment for where the heat's coming from, and he feels a painting that feels warm. There's a painting on the wall. When he pulls it off the wall, he sees a hole. The hole in the wall. I like that panel. And he starts throwing things into it as an experiment, and then weird things pop back out. So he finally screws up the courage, and he just says, fuck it. I got nothing to live for on this earth anywhere. I'm over the hill. I got no prospects. I'm going inside. And apparently it's this just utopian, futuristic paradise in there. And they totally welcome this old guy in and say, yeah, you must live among us. So it looks like a happy ending for this guy. Oh, God, I love this splash page. This is such a great design. This weird jellyfish being. This is called The Big Hunt. And this might be written by Jack Kirby. And maybe inked by Jack Kirby, but it's definitely penciled by Jack Kirby, according to GCD. So we see this big game hunter. And I guess he's in this other dimension. And he's loving it. He's having the time of his life, hunting all these crazy bizarre creatures. And I love the design of this character too. And basically he's had a good hunting expedition and he gets back into his dimension hopping machine. It's called the Egg. And he travels back to our reality. And we see the scientist who developed this thing. The scientist thanks him for testing his device. And the hunter is just all like, oh, dude, I had a great time. Anytime you want me to test it again, feel free. He goes to hang out at his men's club or whatever it's called, where hunters hang out. And they're all laughing at him because he's telling them about what happened. They're like, it's bullshit. But one guy believes him. And he's this rich sportsman. And he says, if you can bring me back the body of that creature you talked about, that last one, I'll give you $200,000. So he goes back to the scientist, says, hey, can I borrow the egg? He says, sure. He goes back to find where he left that dead animal. And then it says, the thing was there as I'd left it, but it was mountainous in size. Something in its body structure had caused it to grow after death. It's too big to take back with me. The end. That is the stupidest twist ending ever. It's so undramatic. It's basically oh, for some stupid reason, this animal got too big for you to take back, so you can't get the money. Those are the stakes. That's not much. Usually these, mystery stories, horror stories that have like life and death shit. This is just like, oh, this guy can't get his money. These Harvey comics, there's so many like that where the twist is just so ridiculous and inconsequential. Next we have, here's a little one-page introduction to The Man in Black. So I guess there was a comic from Harvey in 57, I think, 58, that was called The Man in Black. And he was the horror host, basically, of this anthology. But he also had two, like, assistant horror hosts. The Weaver, who is like, what's the Greek goddess who, like, would sit at a loom weaving our fates? Was that Arachne? I can't remember. And then Aphrodite, the goddess of love. So there's just a little intro page. Basically, The Man in Black is fate. So we start off with Man in Black brushstrokes. So we see this artist, Paul. He's just pretty mediocre. And, of course, everyone knows it, so he doesn't do very well. He has this friend who happens to be an art dealer. And he basically just tells him, he's like, Paul, you're just not that good. You're mediocre. Maybe you should just give it up. And Paul can't accept his fate. He's just like, I just want to paint one great painting. I'll do anything. So the Man in Black shows up and starts guiding his hand one night while he's painting. And he just collapses. Basically, the Man in Black had him painting for hours. The next day when his buddy comes by, he sees the painting. And it's like, oh my God, this is the best painting I've ever seen. You have to let me show it around. This will make your name. So it does. He becomes the toast of the town. Everyone agrees it's the best painting of the 20th century. And he sells it for quite a nice sum of money. But then he just basically parties and pisses all of his money away. Every now and then he paints a normal painting in his crappy style, and it will sell because his name is so big. But of course, people are just like, oh man, what happened to this guy? It's not nearly as good as that first painting. So he's getting poorer and poorer, pissing away his money. Keeps trying to paint, and it's just the law of diminishing returns. Eventually people are just like, oh yeah, screw that guy, he's lost it. And he loses his manager and his agent. And the ending is so odd. Basically, the ending is that once again, his art dealer friend tells him that you're just not good enough. In fact, he basically says that great painting you painted, that's the worst thing that could have ever happened to you, because now everybody expects that. And so basically Paul just goes running out in the streets like crying. And the weird thing is the whole story is just so dumb. Because, I mean, this guy was a total loser anyway. So, yeah, he did one great painting, and sure, he's never going to do another one. But he got a lot of money from that, and he could probably go to cocktail parties for the rest of his life for free as the greatest painter of the 20th century, even though he just did one great painting. But it acts like it's this curse, like, it's the worst thing that could have happened. But then there's a happy ending. The Man in Fate informs us that Paul went on to still be a painter, but find contentment just being a billboard painter. And we see him up here on a scaffold. Next, we have Second Chance. And this is, who's this by? Oh, this is Bob Powell, the art. And Bob Powell might have written it as well. Though I doubt it because it's a really dumb story. I think it's one of the Harvey writers. This is so bad. So apparently aliens have landed and they've sent an unintelligible signal. So this cryptographer is working, trying to decode it. And they're rushing him and he seems kind of nervous. And he's like, okay, I think I have it here. And apparently the message says, deceive us and we will descend on you. So the two generals basically like, this is obviously a message of aggression. Fire at them. Fire at the aliens. And And the cryptographer tries to tell him, wait, I think I got a letter wrong. But before they do, they attack the ship, and the ship instantly obliterates everything. Blows up the world. So then, this is weird. So then the story says, let's imagine if this scene went another way. So in this scene, there's slight differences. The cryptographer doesn't seem as harried. They're not rushing him. They're like, make sure it's correct. But he still makes the mistake. Deceive us and we will descend on you. But luckily, before the guys had a chance to give the command to open fire, the cryptographer says, wait, I got one letter wrong on the typewriter. And apparently it's receive us and we will descend on you. It's so stupid. So because of that, they don't fire on the aliens, and a long-lasting friendship between this planet and Earth, mutually beneficial relationship starts. All because of one letter. And they even mention how obviously this writer just came up with this because he was looking at his typewriter, and I guess on the typewriter D is right over R, so he mistakenly hit the wrong key. Such a dumb idea for a story. Even the whole idea of deceive us and we will descend on you isn't even that threatening. It's like, yeah, don't deceive us. They shouldn't try to deceive them. So idiotic. But I kind of like the Bob Powell art. Now we have another Man in Black story, The Hanging Thread. And this is, once again, Bob Powell. Possibly he wrote it. Once again, I don't think he did, because it's ridiculous. So we basically see the man in black is eavesdropping on these rich people on a cruise ship. And everyone there, these people in this room are discussing fate, kind of having a little philosophical discussion. This woman says, I actually think that I believe in love. I think love can overcome any obstacle, even adverse fate. And her husband says, wishful thinking, my dear. So Man in Black returns to his little wherever, astral realm, and he basically tells the Weaver and Aphrodite about what's going on. And the Weaver says, hey, that ship is fated to sink. You better get on that. So the Man in Black unleashes this old mine from World War II. He breaks the chain so it floats to the surface and explodes against the ship's hull. So the ship is sinking. And the Weaver says, that was a pretty sloppy job. And says, now go collect those destined for the afterworld. And he's like, what? That's the Grim Reaper's job. And she's like, he's busy. You got to do it. So he goes down there, and he basically picks all the people who aren't going to get on the life raft, who are destined to die. And apparently, this woman who was talking about love, her husband is one of those destined to die. She says, fuck that. She's like, come with me. She gets him on a life raft. The Man in Black, of course, doesn't like that. So he makes the whole life raft spill into the ocean, which is odd because a lot of these people were fated to live. That's why they got on the life raft. But now he's just like, they're all going to die. So the wife grabs her husband, grabs a piece of a board from the craft, and is basically saving her husband's life. When he gets back up to the astral plane, the Man in Black, the Weaver says, hey, the husband's thread of life is still here on my loom. You still haven't gotten him. So he goes back down there, and, he basically tells the wife, he's like, I got to take him. And she says, but I love him. So when the Man in Black reaches for the husband, one of her tears falls on his hand, and it's almost as if it burns him. And he stares at it for a little while. And then he realizes he can't do it, and he lets him go. I kind of like this in the astral realm, how it's like this weird sepia, I don't know, craft tint, something going on here. Even though in the printing, it's kind of blotchy. So basically he comes up and has to admit to those guys, he's like, yeah, I just couldn't do it. I guess love did win out over fate. And of course Aphrodite loves it. She's all gloating. Next we have another Man in Black story, The Fly in the Ointment. Once again, maybe written by Bob Powell, but definitely drawn by him. And this is this brother and sister are traveling in olden times in this Asian country named Genji. And one of the soldiers of this place, he just doesn't like these two strangers, and he rips off the sister's veil. The brother slugs him, and so the other soldiers grab him and condemn him to death. But first they're going to take him to the king to let him render judgment. The brother says in our country to look behind a woman's veil is to invite death. And the king says, well, in our country, if you punch a soldier, it invites death too. But I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to let you do the trial of the jars tomorrow. So there's 2 jars. And if you pick the right one, you get a jewel. If you pick the wrong one, there's a poisonous snake inside that'll kill you. So they haul the brother off to jail. This guy at court, this shady character, basically whispers to the sister, says, hey, if you give me some money, I can assure that your brother will pick the right jar. So she goes to visit the brother and tells him the plan. She says, okay, so if I scratch my right cheek tomorrow, you pick the right jar. And, if I scratch my left cheek, the left jar. So that guy takes the sister to basically the guy who's in charge of the trials. So, she bribes him and he says, yeah, it'll be the right jar. We'll have the jewel. That'll be the good jar. So she's thrilled that she's going to be able to save her brother. But apparently, the king who decreed that if the brother dies, the sister's going to have to join his harem. So not only does he not want to lose a jewel, he also wants the sister for his harem. So he tells the guys to, change the jars. Even though they took her money, they're actually going to put the snake in the right jar. And the next day, it's the trial. And the Man in Black starts talking about all the flies buzzing around and how just a small fly can change fate so much. So the sister's trying to signal to the brother, but guards keep getting in the way of his line of sight. And then this fly starts bugging her, flying around her left cheek. And she eventually swats it away. The brother looks up right then and sees his sister scratching her left cheek. So he reaches for the left jar, and there's a jewel in it. Of course, those 2 guys are shocked. And because of that fly, he saved the day. Because, the sister obviously was trying to signal him, saying, no, I didn't mean the left cheek. But luckily, that was the right one. And then we see those 2 guys, the trial master and his buddy, for failing. The king sends his soldiers to execute him. Next, the Weaver takes the spotlight as the host, and she tells the tale of this gladiator named Gracchus. And he has a patron, Crassius. He's basically his, Gracchus is his slave. So whenever he wins a bout, he gives him a little bit of gold. He's got this wife who's got diarrhea of the nag, and she's constantly telling him, we've just got to leave this city. We can't live on this paltry little bags of gold he gives you every now and then. He lives like a king, and you get nothing. We've got to get out of here. I have an uncle in the neighboring city. He'll take us in if we can get out of the city. So they plot to do that. They go to Cassius's chamber. They sneak in, the husband and wife, and they kill him and take a bunch of his gold. The soldiers are onto him pretty quick, And there's a couple pages of exciting chase scenes and them trying to escape these soldiers. And then they finally make it out of the city, and they travel for like days through the desert. And then finally she says, look, the great volcano, the landmark of my uncle's city. I am too weary to even remember its name. I too, even today's date slips my mind. It is August 23rd, is it not? Just the worst dialogue ever, because I don't know if you know where this can see where this is heading. It turns out it's Pompeii, the day before the volcano erupts and kills everyone. But just this dialogue of telegraphing that, and how she can't even remember the name of the city that she's traveled, days to reach. And then the weaver in her craft-tinted heaven gives a little comment on it. Next, we have the fireballs, and this is all Jack Kirby. Maybe the writing, though once again I doubt it. And George Rousseau supposedly helped a little on the inks. A good-looking story. We see these two kids out in the country, in the forest, and they see these fireballs just hovering in the air. Then they start to chase them. The kids run back home. Then the fireballs are surrounding the house. The parents call the authorities. And the local sheriff rushes out in his Jeep. The fireballers start chasing him. They're chasing planes. It's just this big mystery. And then finally, one of the fireballs kind of takes over the form of one of these state troopers and speaks through him. Basically says, greetings and peace. We are inhabitants of the star you call the sun. We have observed signs of our own species on your planet. And one of the scientists here says, that's impossible. There's no species on the planet composed of living, intelligent energy. That is not true, the alien informs him. We have seen our species here. And then these flying discs come out of nowhere, and they seem to be conversing with the fireballs, and then they all take off. And so the twist ending, which this makes no sense. The scientist says, we never thought of them as living creatures. We've been calling them UFOs all this time, or flying saucers. So stupid. How I do love this, though, and I blame George Rousseau. I don't think Kirby would have ever been this slapdash. Look how wall-eyed this guy looks. I love this panel just because it's so goony. They really kind of dropped the ball there, but it kind of looks great. Oh, man, it's such a dumb story. This next one is, once again, this one's all Kirby, except for Joe Simon helps on inks. Oh, man, look at this character design. Just Kirby was so amazing. This was a, 5-page story. He was probably getting paid shit from Harvey. And yet he comes up with this, I would read 50 comics of this character, this creature. Such an amazing design. This is called I Want to Be a Man. We see this scientist, David Randolph. He's a computer scientist, and he's invented the biggest computer ever. It's called the Fabiac. And one day he gets a little message, ticker tape message from the computer, and it says, I can think. And he also tells Rudolph, he says, I want eyes to see, limbs to use. I can think, I can feel emotion. I want to be a man. And so Rudolph just types back, a man is flesh and blood. You're a machine. Be content with that. Do your job. But then the computer just keeps spitting out ticker tape. It is my right. It is my right. Over and over. So Rudolph relents and he decides to build him this robot body. And there's I wish it was a more front picture of the design. It still looks pretty cool. And so basically he sets him up in this a walled garden. And the robot says, I want to see the rest of the world beyond the wall. And he says, you will in time, Fabiac. But it's more important now is you got you have to do these equations. And then one day he gets a call from the compound, and they're like, you got to come here quick. It's Fabiac. And I guess the workers there were like, it was the weirdest thing. We were bringing a solar mirror in that you ordered, and then all of us, he smashed it, and then he basically killed himself. He bashed in his computer brain. And here we see him dead. And basically the last ticker tape message, goodbye, David, I cannot bear the truth. So basically the robot, we're supposed to believe that he just had no idea that he wasn't a human all that time. Because he never saw a mirror. And when he saw himself in the mirror for the first time, he was like, I'm not a man. And he killed himself. So really dumb. This next one's called Knockout. And it's once again an unknown writer, but it's penciled and inked by Joe Certa. And this is basically about this aging boxer, and his name's Maxwell. And his days are done. He hasn't won a fight in months. His manager basically says, we're through. You're a loser. But he says, just book me one more fight. Give me one more chance. And the manager says, okay. So the boxer's wandering around just like, what the hell am I going to do? I'm not going to win the next fight. But this weird old guy comes up to him in this diner, and he says, my name's Dr. Quigley. I have something that'll make you a winner again. And he sells him this bottle. He says it's a few drops before a fight, and victory will be yours again. So Maxwell says, what do I got to lose? Why not? So that big fight that his manager booked, he takes the drops, and he totally fights like a young man again. He wins. He keeps taking the drops and keeps winning. And finally, he's at the championship level. He's going to go up against the champ. And of course, wouldn't you know it, that night, the drops have run out. So he runs around the city trying to find Dr. Quigley, but he can't. So at the fight, it goes as to be expected. He's just getting his ass handed to him. And then in between two of the rounds, he looks out and he sees Dr. Quigley in the crowd. He tells his manager, he says, go ask that guy for another bottle. He'll know what I'm talking about. And so the manager goes out, talks to Quigley, and Quigley says, too late, Mr. Sleazer. I forgot to mention that the manager's name is Sleazer. And so Maxwell dies during the fight. And Sleazer says, you got to tell me what was in that bottle. And Quigley says, nothing but colored water. He just thought it helped him. He needed something to give him faith. But the bottle ran dry. How profound. Next we have The Invasion. And this is a pretty dumb one. Supposedly written by Bob Powell, but definitely written, penciled and inked by him. So this couple are home one night watching TV, and I love this how there's just one chair in front of the TV for the husband to sit on, and the wife who brings in coffee, she sits on the floor next to him like a dog. And all of a sudden, the regular broadcast is interrupted by a news bulletin. And apparently aliens have landed on Earth. And everyone's terrified. They're just like, we don't know what the hell's going on. And of course, the wife and husband are just like, shit. And then we see the spacecraft, and we see them land, and these 12-foot tall aliens come out, just start firing and incinerating everyone. Just basically killing the soldiers, killing everyone. And the announcer says, we're unable to stop them. And then one of the aliens, oh my God, look at this alien. That face is so funny. It looks like some old, Catskill Jewish comedian. I can't think of his name right now, but he totally reminds me of some old Jewish comedian. He says, attention, Earth people. We of Mars have conquered your planet. We will hunt you down and exterminate you. So the couple just throw a few things into a suitcase and say, we got to run for the hills. And then the last panel, we see the TV announcer says, the WXCH network has just brought you an original telescreen drama entitled The Invasion from Mars. So it's a play on the whole War of the Worlds thing. It's so stupid. It's just badly done. It might have been done well with better pacing or something, but it's just ridiculous. So there you have it, guys. Shocking Tales Digest #1. These are kind of hard to find, these digest comics. I think a lot of people just consider them disposable. They're kind of hard to find in the back issue bins. But if you ever see this, pick it up. It's probably won't be much money, and it's got some gems in here. And even the ludicrous bad stories are kind of funny and kind of worth having just for how silly they are. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.